Breaking the gray.
Good morning, Sarah. Well, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon for me. Yes. Good morning to you.
How is everything going? It's been a few days. How are things going with you?
Yes. Just the same, thank you, Russ.
Good,
All the better
good.
to see you both today.
Yes, who do we have today? I'm excited.
So we have Don Moxley. I'd like to introduce Don Moxley of Spermidine Life and also Mode Method, but also an expert on heart rate variability, which is one of the things it would be cool to talk about today. So welcome, Don. It's so lovely to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Sarah and Russ, for having me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's a total pleasure.
So, Don, Sarah and I have been, venturing down the podcast trail now for a long time, 3 years, and we've talked to experts around heart rate variability. What is it? Like, let's just go through and give kind of like the basic definition, and then we'll get to some of the advanced stuff. But what is heart rate variability for everyone that kind of doesn't know it?
So at a very technical level, heart rate variability is the difference in times between heartbeats. It's not the time between heartbeats, it's the difference in the times between heartbeats. And when we measure this, it's been a relatively difficult thing to measure over the years. And technology has been evolving and improving, and now it's really accessible. The technologies, wearable technologies, have really made it accessible. And so at a practical level, it is a measurement of your stress management system. So part of your nervous system is called the autonomic system, the automatic system. You have control over part of your nervous system, your motor nervous system. Do I want to pick something up or set something down? I have control over that. But the things that run our organs that we don't have to think about, like our lungs and our kidneys, and those are run by the automatic system. And that system has two sides to it, or two drivers. One is called sympathetic, or fight or flight. That if a bear walks around the corner, your brain recognizes the risk. It dumps a bunch of chemicals to say, hey, get away from the bear. Or you're going to be lunch. And then once you get away from the bear, the system says, hey, let's chill for a little bit. So our parasympathetic kicks in, and we begin the recovery process. At a practical level, Russ, the challenge is that this was a great system when we were hunter-gatherers evolving on the savannah. But now a good friend of mine says we have way too many paper tigers in our life. Dealing with a tiger is one thing, but when we're dealing with the paper tigers of relationships and stress and IRS and all the things that go, and the perceived threats, again, tax season's around the corner right now, okay? Tax season is not going to eat us. It's not going to end our ability to distribute our DNA. But we still perceive it as a stress or a relationship or things like that. So as we have this chronic stress, we wind up having a chronic impact on our sympathetic system, which inevitably leads to a lowering of our HRV. The HRV measurement that most people see. I don't want to get super technical here. There's a lot of analyses that go into that. But if you're using a wearable device, anywhere from Oura Ring to Cardio Mode, name it, that number that they're reporting is your HRV number. It's a measurement of, the nerve that runs all of your organs is called your vagal nerve. And the vagal nerve, when it's activated and the organs are working, that's a good thing. That's high HRV. That's what we want. But when we get stressed, all of a sudden, a lot of those, digestion shuts down, things like that. And it shifts energy out to our skeletal system. And that's our sympathetic system. And you don't want that driving all the time. You want to be able to cycle that. And so whether we're using exercise or some other kind of stressors, positive stressors, the rest recovery, stimulus recovery, that's what drives that number up.
And so you want the variability. You don't want to constantly be high, and you don't want to constantly be low. And both of them have their negatives, right? Being low means you're sedentary, you're not moving around, you're not creating enough there, or not.
or you're under too much stress. So chronically low HRV is an indicator. Listen, what we know is the heartbeats right before you die, your HRV will be 0. Okay, the farther you stay away from 0, the farther you stay away from death. And that's and what we see is like in elite athletes, when we start looking at people, elite athletes that are well trained, well conditioned, well recovered, they have very high HRVs, 100, 150 milliseconds. Most of us, I don't know what your numbers are. Most of normal humans are lucky they're in that range of 20 to 50 milliseconds. When I'm working with an elite athlete, my background and where we really did a deep dive on this was with collegiate wrestlers. If I send a collegiate wrestler to the national tournament with an HRV of less than 70 milliseconds, they don't make All-American. If I send them with 75 or more milliseconds, they make All-American. And the higher the number, the higher their score in the tournament. They're finishing the tournament. So this was some of our first, and we can use HRV for diagnosis of problems. We can use it for prescription. What work should I do? How should I do it? We can also use it for selection. Are you ready for the challenge we're getting ready to put you in? So we can use it for all of it.
I'm curious, and my HRV, I'm looking at it right now. I am not going to be making All-American this year. It's okay.
It's okay.
But I'm curious about resting heart rate, because I feel resting heart rate is something that everyone now can see that number, and they don't really know what that number means. And what is the right zone to be in for resting heart, or does it depend on who you are and your size and all those things still?
There's certainly genetic differentiation in genetic heart rate. Some people just have bigger hearts than others. Some people are a Grinch and they've got a small heart and it's got to beat a lot to get the blood to flow. Some people have really big hearts and it only takes a couple beats for the blood to flow. You can think of resting heart rate as a proxy for fitness. The better my fitness level, the lower my resting heart rate will be. So that's a great KPI. So if you're looking at is what I'm doing making a difference, measuring your nighttime resting heart rate is a really good KPI. And most of these wearables will report that with your HRV.
I think we should get personal, Russ. I want to go, because we're using heart rate variability, Don, to track. We're kind of on a longevity protocol. As Russ said, we've got a cumulative age of 100, and so our aim is to kind of look to move some of these markers. And we've done our epigenetic age, we've done a few things now, but heart rate variability is something that I focus on if I'm looking at, helping people with brain health. But how kind of reliable is this? Because I have to say, mine's all over the place. Mine goes from 15 to 40. I've kind of looked to try and analyze it. And actually, the weird thing is, I've started to up my exercise a bit for this regime we're on, and it decreases after I've done exercise.
It should. Remember, so exercise, you don't get stronger exercising. You get stronger recovering from exercise. Okay, so this is the important part. So, so let me take it back to my athlete model. With my athletes, we would look at HRV and actually in the collegiate wrestling season, we start in late August, early September. We start the season. We go into what I call weight cutting season. September, October, the guys are cutting weight. So when you're in the middle of cutting weight, the body sees that as a starvation state, and it lowers your HRV will go down. So we get that. And then we'll recover it back. Once we stop cutting weight, we kind of get settled out. We start to see it come back up. But then we come out of the holidays. We usually send the guys home right around Christmas. They get 5 or 6 or 7 days home on their own. They come back right around New Year's, and we get ready to prepare for the important part of our season. January, February, March is the real important part of that season. But that block of time right before we start the January prep season is my last chance to really take guys into a deep training block. I expect HRV to tank during the deep training block. In fact, I use HRV as my tool. Are we pushing hard enough? Because if we're pushing and I'm not getting a drop in that HRV, what I know is I'm not stimulating that sympathetic system enough. So we start to use those tools when we're working in that space. Then when we see it come back, it's that rhythm. Listen, the human body loves rhythms. Whether it's the circadian rhythm or it's your autonomic system rhythm. I mean, the body likes that challenge recovery. And when you're doing that well, and you have quality work and quality recovery, you will constantly see an increase in that nighttime resting HRV number.
Right. So the key is in the recovery. So, if you're amping up your exercise regime, and when I say amping up, really for me, that is, I'm doing 1.5 miles. I mean, it's really very lame what I'm doing. I run 1.5 miles every morning, which is an increase for me. I do stretching and yoga and all the other things, but I haven't done any cardio. And it's kind of disheartening to see, my HRV going down, sometimes to like 15 for like 3 days in a row after doing
try not to be disheartened. Well, there's a couple of things here. And I'll tell you guys, years ago, many years ago, 35 years ago, when you were very young, I had first started working for a company called Polar, the heart rate monitor company.
Yeah.
And prior to this, I was a professor of exercise science and exercise physiology, and we were teaching kids how to measure heart rate with 2 fingers on the carotid artery.
Right.
This is a joke, okay? When you can get a piece of technology for $50 now that you put on and you get the equivalent of a wired EKG to your phone, okay? You're crazy for exercising without it. You're leaving money on the table. Okay, so let's start there. Now, when you start to think about this, Sarah, you want to think about those zones that you're exercising in. And this is one of the mistakes a lot of people make, is that if you start exercising without a heart rate monitor, how hard do you go? Yeah. Well, you go till you feel it, right? I go till I feel it. Well, the problem is with you're feeling lactate. Okay, you're raising your energy system to where you're recruiting energy from what we call anaerobic sources. It creates lactic acid. That's what you feel. The problem is lactate is a trigger for cortisol. Okay, right. When the body says, "Oh, he's creating lactate," listen. If a bear walks around the corner, you try to escape. You're dumping all the energy. The body says, "Hey, let's make sure we have both the aerobic and anaerobic energy we have." And you get a cortisol response. Cortisol drives HRV down. It's a stress signal. Now, if you'll exercise in what we call zone 2 and 3 of a 5-zone system, stay below that line between zone 3 and zone 4, you get exercise, you get mitochondrial development, you get the systematic development of the positive parts, but you don't get the cortisol.
Right.
Okay. And so again, when you're exercising, and this isn't just for longevity. We put this program into my wrestling program that we won a national title with. We used to run a lot. When you understand the science of threshold training, staying below that, doing work that gets benefit, but you don't pay a price for. Every time you run, you pay a price. Your entire nervous system travels through the fascia of your body. And every time your foot hits, it disturbs that fascia. Right. You pay a price. Yeah. Listen, I think bicycles, whether it's a Peloton or an outside bike or whatever, are wonderful training tools because I can get a great sustained work. I get the mitochondrial development. I get the energy system development, but I don't pay the price with the fascia disruption. Again, when you're running, the body says something's chasing me. That's not a good thing, especially when you run for an extended period of time. Again, if you're hunter-gatherer and you're running to catch a food, like let's say you see a rabbit and that's your lunch for the day, that's usually a very quick and explosive event. It's not a sustained 5-mile run. It's not 40 minutes. If it's a 40-minute run, the body says there's something going on here that probably isn't good. So being able to get that work in that zone 2-3 from a longevity standpoint is a huge benefit, because you're not going to die when you run out of time. You're going to die when you run out of energy. Energy is a mitochondrial driven process. It's an energy production process. You build this in zone 2 and zone 3 very effectively but you don't know you're in zone 2 and zone 3 unless you're wearing a monitor.
Yeah.
And Sarah and I, Aura Ring aficionados here. We and yeah, and there's something about quantified self that, I mean, it's good to know. And now, I mean, what we've been trying to do over the last, several years here is just to say, okay, what is it that I'm looking at? What do these numbers mean? And this is an interesting one because for me, I have been a little bit more sedentary since COVID. Haven't been as much exercise. I played college sports early in my freshman year, dropped out of football. My daughter plays college basketball. But I've like foregone the exercising part of my life. And now, okay, over 50, what is it we do to get ourselves back into the right shape? My inkling is get out there and go run 10 miles, but it's more. So what are these zones, Don? Like let's walk through what those zones mean a little bit, because those are important, I think, for everyone to get and understand them maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Russ, listen, athlete transition is not an easy thing. I was a college wrestler. And, when you're a college athlete, if your face isn't on fire from how hard you're working, you don't think you're working enough. That is an important habit to break. Okay. It's important to get away from that. So when we start talking about zones, I work in a 5-zone system, and this is something you can Google and see. It's out on the internet. But zone 1 is just above rest. So when we're sitting, we stand up, we go out for a walk, we walk the dog. We're working in zone 1, maybe borderline into zone 2. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Zone 5 is max effort. Okay. This is something that's only sustainable for a few seconds. And we typically cycle in and out of that max effort. That's zone 5. It's a good place to get to occasionally. So as we work from zone 1 to zone 2, zone 3 is the top of what we call our aerobic system, that all of the energy that's coming in zone 3 is pure aerobic energy. When I flip to zone 4, I'm starting to recruit energy that's anaerobic. All of a sudden, I have another system that I have to pay back at some point in time, because all the energy that I make in zone, all that anaerobic energy has got to get paid back at some time. So it gets converted to lactate and pyruvate, and there's a whole process that goes there. But zone 4 is like a black hole for training, particularly for longevity. There's no benefit that comes in zone 4 that you can't get in zone 3. This is an important point. There's a lot of benefits that come in zone 2. So Russ, a lot of it is giving yourself permission, having compassion with yourself, to, not call yourself a wuss because, I used to do this all the time as an athlete. This was easy. Get past that. Athletic days are over for the most part. Now, I still love to teach wrestling. I've got 11 years on you guys. So I turned 61 on my next birthday, and kind of my motivating, my passion, my purpose is coaching and instruction. I've had a chance to coach amazing athletes, Olympic medalists, pros, and incredible people. My favorite coaching job ever was my daughter's 7th grade field hockey team. I can't wait to coach my grandkids. And about 4 years ago, my nephew qualified for the Florida State high school wrestling tournament. He's a heavyweight big guy. He's playing Division I football now. He's a center. So, he's roughly my body size. And I got to go down and work out with him to help him get ready for the Florida State tournament. You know what? I was still pretty good for a day. I still had him, the old crusty, college wrestler. The first day. The second day was a disaster. Okay. I mean, stuff was popping. It was a mess. and so at the end, the thing that you learn, I want to be that crazy 90-year-old that walks into a wrestling room and people say, holy shit, he's still got something.
It's funny, Don. I was going to say, I have one wrestler who you might know that I used to work with. I worked at Stanford in the athletic department back in the mid 90s. And there was the guy that would come in 95 years old. He'd run the track. He'd do a 2 miles a day. He looked like he was in his 50s. He looked fantastic. And we would always talk, but I worked with Jay Jackson. I don't know if you know who Jay Jackson is.
Oh, yeah.
He was a wrestler at Stanford, and he just wrote a book. He coaches as well. I think he's a coach up in Washington area. But yeah, I mean, I there is this thing of like, punishing, right? And Sarah and I have talked about this, like exercising to punish yourself, and like, and to me, that's just another form of therapy, and get to a therapist fast, because you're punishing yourself for some reason you should be. But there is this like getting to this ample time. And so, and I don't know, Sarah, I'm going to take this into a discussion around like HIIT exercising, but is it important then that when you're deciding to do a daily workout to not go for a long run, but maybe it is doing kind of the interval training, right? That is that an important thing to kind of get into your daily regimen?
Listen, here's what we know. Almost everything works. Okay. Almost everything. The question is, does it work for you? And this is the challenge. Okay. So, there's this, in cannabis, we talk about start low, go slow. Exercise fits the same way. Listen, 95% of the people who set the goal of training for a marathon never make it to the start line because they get hurt.
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
This is, you have to recognize that. And I'm usually talking people out of half marathon goals. If I can't get you talked out of your marathon goal down to a half marathon, then we're dealing with it. But marathons are physically debilitating events. Okay. And it takes a very special physiology to be able to do that repeatedly. Homie here does not have that physiology. I've got the genetics for picking up heavy shit,
Same.
Not running after deer.
God gave us legs to lift big, heavy things, right? Like I always say that to her. Like I always say it to my wife. I'm like, the only reason why I'm here is to go reach up high and to lift your heavy bags, and that's the only reason I'm here for you.
I tell mine, I said, you married me for my stiff back, and that's what it is.
Exactly.
Rarely does someone ask me for help with a math question, but if they have a piano that needs moved, they come
exactly.
Yeah. So listen, it's incredibly individual. And this is where the value of HRV comes into play. So let's pull this back for a second. Think of HRV as the check engine light in your car. Okay. When that number's dropping, you need to think about, okay, what am I doing that's causing this to drop? And am I doing the things that I need to make this engine run better? Is recovery part of what I do? And when we look at recovery and we look at longevity, those things go hand in hand. The right level of exercise, the right level of movement will cause that HRV to move the direction you want. Invest in cardiovascular work. Again, cardiovascular work drives mitochondrial development. Mitochondrial development is energy. Energy is life. Okay. That equation is well established. It's good to do hard work too. It's important to pick up heavy stuff on occasion. But you don't have to finish your workout every time laying in a puddle of sweat. That is not necessary. Now, if you're in good enough shape and you get off on that and you get the dopamines, God love you. Okay, I don't want to take you away from that. But someone who's listening to this, watching this, thinking to myself, I want to live longer. I want a purpose of living longer, enjoying my family, enjoying my life. Getting. Listen, Sarah, you and I talked about this when we saw each other in Austin. My daughter moved out of our home a year ago, January 2nd last year. She took a coaching job up in Chicago. I looked at my wife and I said, she's not coming home. We're done. And I think of life in 3/3. I spend the first third of my life learning. I spend the second third of my life in service to others, work, family, things like that. But my third started the day my daughter moved out. And I looked at my wife and I go, what are we going to do? So we sold our house. And actually, I'm in a 42-foot RV right now in Sedona, Arizona. We spent the last year traveling the country looking for our next home. My third, I want to adventure. I want to climb. I want to, I grew up a farm kid in relative poverty. Vacations for us were going to the county fair and the state fair. We're visiting all the national parks. And all of these things you enjoy more as your fitness improves. I define fitness as the physical capacity to enjoy the life you're given. Okay. Do I have a wedding coming up? Do I have a vacation coming up? No one takes a freaking picture of their scale and hangs it on the wall and says, yeehaw. Now, they will take pictures of a 5K finish or a 10K or things like that. Those are things we celebrate. They're important. But the real things we put on the wall are those weddings and vacations and those really cool things. That picture, we've now got a series of selfies from all over the country in a lot of national parks that I'm looking forward to posting on social. Easter Sunday is the anniversary of moving into our rig. I'm putting together posts, and all of those selfies that we took across the kind of front of the Tetons and Yosemite and Lake Tahoe and just all over. That's what I want to celebrate, and I want to keep doing that. Again, I want to be that crazy 90-year-old.
Yeah, you're heading in the right direction for sure. I mean, that is fabulous. It seems to me that we were kind of talking about exercise, but now really we're talking about, are you recovering enough that you're looking after your body, that you're gonna be able to live long too? Because you're right, it's not about looking like looking like a muscle man, that you can get that. What you really want is to be healthy and age well, and to do that, the recovery is the important piece.
There are some people that are gifted with physical attractiveness. I've never suffered that, so the question is the point that I go back to: if a bar fight breaks out, do I stay in it? Do I back out of it, or do I start it? I know I'm doing good when I'm ready to start it. If I don't feel good and I'm not doing well, I back out of it. But you know what? Most of the time we're in that middle. Okay, I'll stay in it if I need to. It's that challenge. And again, this mug doesn't worry about beauty.
Don, that bar fight analogy is a great example of the 3/3 of your life. I imagine that the first third of your life you were creating the fight. Second third you're in it, and the third third you're like, I gotta go. I gotta take off right now.
Yeah, I got.
It's at least a decision.
It's at least,
right. It's at least a decision.
Right. I find it. There's this fascinating thing around discovery in this biohacking world that we're in, and I think the discovery around proper ways to exercise. And I remember, you're running and I'm like, oh, that old football injury, my damn knee. Like those things pop up. And the injuries that I created, back when I was 17 years old still crop up. I get injuries today just walking up the stairs. I get hurt. And my recovery time, I was telling my daughter, we went skiing the other day. I fell, I bruised my calf. Because I literally was in the line and I just sort of leaned over and fell and I bruised it took me 2 weeks to get rid of the bruise. I'm like, this sucks. So I'm wondering on recovery, because recovery of injuries, another thing there. What are there things that as you're getting better at this, can you get better at recovery time
Absolutely. You optimize the system for that. There's no two ways about that. Listen, Russ, you fell and bruised your calf back in your first third, okay, and it wasn't a big deal. And as I've had 8 knee surgeries, I mean that's the price I paid for my athletics. And we're constantly working around this. This is the reason I park my ass on a bike when I can. That's an important part for me. And the other side of that, when you start looking again, quality aging, the things that are going to take you out, the things that risk your life in middle age are the things your mother warned you about. Wear your seatbelt, put your helmet on, do these kinds of things. Don't be stupid. If you can get through that middle age stuff, the things you got to worry about taking you out late are inflammatory related diseases, cancers, immune response. They're all inflammatory. These are all related to poor diet and poor exercise. Okay. As you improve movement, and again, movement that's appropriate to you, and heart rate variability are great KPIs. They're great key performance indicators to measure your progress with. I've already said it on this podcast. I'll say it again. If you're going to exercise, a heart rate monitor is more important than your shoes. Okay. So everyone likes to go spend the money on the shoes and the outfit and get the Lulu and go down and go crazy with that. And I'm all good with that. But spend $50 and get a good heart rate monitor too. Or, even our wearables, the Apple Watch heart rate monitor is getting pretty good. In fact, they're supposed to be adding a 5-zone system to their latest software. I have not seen it yet, but I know it's coming. And if you don't have that, go buy a Polar transmitter. and let it and connect it to your phone. These are amazing tools. Number one. Number two is get that check engine light working with that KPI of HRV. Because this is giving you that overall, and again, fixing HRV, there's a 4-step process to that. Movement, get your movement right. And Russ, we have to pick up heavy stuff because late in life, once you've gotten past the risk of cancer, the risk of heart disease, things like that, the biggest risk to life is falling, breaking a bone, and throwing a clot. So maintaining muscular strength into old age is a huge performance indicator. And again, you've got to be strong. I love the definition of balance. My definition of balance is the ability to fall in any direction. Okay. That's what good balance is, to be able to control my fall. You know, we were in Yosemite and we got 40 inches of snow. We were in Lake Tahoe and we got about 20 inches or 30 inches and they had 10 feet on the ground. So we're fighting ice. And I'll tell you what, I hit the ice, in the last 3 months, I've hit the ice probably a half a dozen times and gone ass over tea kettle and landed hard. And you know what? I'm like, okay, I don't fall like I was when I was 20, but I'm still able to fall. I'm still able to control my fall. And I'm not worrying about breaking a bone or blowing a shoulder out. And this is the kind of stuff so you got to lift heavy shit every once in a while.
Yeah, I've booked up to go to the gym tomorrow because I don't do that. I do push-ups and things, body weight, but I'm Russ. That's it. Tomorrow is the start of my
hips and legs, Sarah. Yep. Hips and legs.
I'm totally down. Also, we want to talk a little bit about your supplements, Don, because last time we met in Austin, I know you'd come out with a new supplement, and we're into these are the things that you can do that don't involve you kind of getting up and landing in a puddle of sweat. These are the things we can actually do to support our systems. And I'm really interested to hear now your take on using these things for recovery, because it has dawned on me that isn't something that I've focused on. We're very much focused on going out there and kind of smashing it, pushing yourself through. But yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit on the recovery piece. And
so the other side of that, the number one driver of poor HRV in adults is chronic inflammation. Okay. Inflammation is what the number one driver. And when you look at all health problems after 50 or 60, they're all inflammation related. As inflammation goes up, disease goes up, HRV goes down. Now, the other thing that we understand is we've now started to learn about part of our body's nervous system that's called the endocannabinoid system. So part of your nervous system was discovered in the effort to understand how does THC work from cannabis, okay? And so we have this thing called the endocannabinoid system. And what we know is that when you exercise, one of the biggest benefits is your body produces a molecule, a ligand that's called anandamide. Anandamide is called an endocannabinoid. It's called the Zen molecule. So let's think about this. If your body craves hydration, how does it signal you?
Yeah, you get thirsty.
You get thirsty. If your body craves energy, how does it signal you?
Get hungry.
You get hungry. So what is anxiety? When you get anxious, what is that? For years, we've talked about, oh, my kids are going crazy. I've given them too much sugar. No, anxiety is a signal to move, because when you move, your body produces two really important little molecules. One is called anandamide, which improves that endocannabinoid system communication and lowers stress, it improves HRV, it lowers sympathetic. But it also produces an interesting little molecule that's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which catalyzes, which facilitates learning, okay? So people who move more learn better, okay? People who move more have more anandamide. Well, we live in these aquariums where our movement is limited, our food is limited, and we know that we can consume exogenous products to help with these processes. So we have created a supplement. It's called HRV Plus. It is a combination of cannabinoids. So we use, you've probably heard of cannabidiol, CBD. I think it's a little overrated. We've got it in there, but we also have an equal portion of CBDA, the acid form that comes from the plant, which is much more biologically active than CBD is. CBDA, and then we add another terpene molecule. It's called a dietary cannabinoid. It's called beta-caryophyllene. All of these hit CB1, CB2, pain receptors, dopamine receptors. These are all clear-cut elements that hit those receptors and improve endocannabinoid system tone. And when you're measuring HRV and you're measuring stress, you're proxy measuring your endocannabinoid system. As endocannabinoid system performance drops, HRV will drop. And we see this. We see this with the role of the amygdala, the fear-sensing part of the brain. We know when we fear condition mice and dogs, there's a drop of anandamide in the amygdala. Anytime that you're in a chronic stress situation, I mean, if you're born in a rattlesnake pit, the only way you survive is through hypervigilance. You've got to be vigilant. Now, if I take you out of the rattlesnake pit and I put you in a house full of bunnies, you're still hypervigilant. Because that anandamide level has dropped in the amygdala, it's still there. And if you think about cannabis and the history of it in this country, you think about back in the 60s and 70s when we were taking young American men and dropping them in Vietnam. Probably the closest we come to living in a rattlesnake pit, okay? These guys come home and they are trauma affected, okay? What do they like to do? They like to smoke weed because weed does a really nice job. And I'm talking about old weed, not new weed. When we look at old weed, we had a really nice combination of, we had a much higher CBD content, lower THC, and it had it had that Zen effect. It supports the anandamide. It hits those receptors. These were the first signs that we saw. You know, we legalized cannabis in states based on the back of cancer patients and epileptics. There's certainly a neural communication element that goes with the endocannabinoid system with epileptics. But when we look at the stress of cancer treatment, that's a fear-driven. The body is seeing that, saying, "Holy shit, we're poisoning the cancer out of us," and the body's saying, "You're poisoning." So all of a sudden, cannabis becomes a nice little tool there. But there's a challenge that goes there. Those cannabinoids can be manipulated differently than what we do to produce a euphoric effect. We can use it to produce a calming effect, which leads to better sleep, which leads to improved HRV. And again, we combine ours with an omega-3 DHA EPA fat that has been enhanced with something that's called a specialized pro-resolving mediator, SPM. And an SPM are the biologically available end of the omega-3 inflammation resolving pathway. We build it right into the supplement. So the supplement's built to improve endocannabinoid system tone, so that system's ready to communicate, can do it and adjust. We put omega-3s in it, and then we throw in a little curcumin and a little magnesium too. But certainly the DHA, EPA, and SPMs are these resolving elements of the inflammatory pathway, which cause so much disease.
Yeah. It sounds actually like a great dementia product, because the endocannabinoid system is totally linked to the brain is immune capacity. And, you're talking about
everywhere. You can't separate it.
You can't separate it out. And, all of those other things you talked about, the curcumin and the omega-3, I mean, that's exactly what you need to have a healthy brain. These are all things. I mean, yeah, of course, the body is the body, and inflammation in the body is also inflammation in the brain. But specifically neuroinflammation, I think, will respond to these cannabinoids because that's where the endocannabinoid system is operating.
Yeah, and anytime that you have inflammation, it's important to understand. I don't remember hearing part of your part where you guys have talked about autophagy. But
no, we haven't.
Okay, so autophagy is another important aging process. When you look at all those inflammatory diseases, they all have in common there's a lack of intracellular cleaning that we call autophagy. That as autophagy goes up, inflammation comes down. It's hand in hand. We know that is very clear. And there's key molecules that drive that. Our company, Longevity Labs, we started using a product. There's a product that's called Spermidine. So there's a molecule that's called spermidine that we now understand is a key molecule in the autophagy process. So these things go hand in hand. Now, spermidine and autophagy is working down at a cellular level, deep in the cell, whereas HRV and HRV plus are working a little system higher. They're working up in the nervous system, and the resolving of the inflammation. So it's working higher. So we're hitting it at two different levels. We certainly understand spermidine crosses the blood-brain barrier. People who supplement spermidine stop the development of dementia. The data is pretty clear on that.
And Don, supplements are now part of all of the things we talk about it a lot. And Sarah and I take several a day. Sarah takes more than me. I'm curious: is this a recovery supplement? Is it a daily supplement? How do you advise your people using it?
It varies from person to person, Russ. Again, Russ's world, Don's world, Sarah's world are three different worlds. Okay, and I don't know. You might live with rattlesnakes, and Sarah might live with bunnies, and I tend to go in between. So being able to understand your environment, and again, this is where HRV comes into play. Is this number chronic? And again, you've got to be careful. I mean, working with your doctor, if you've got a chronically low HRV and you've done all you can to fix sleep, you've done all you can to get the right nutrients, you've done all you can you've got movement, exercise is doing well, and you're getting good light. I think light is an important part of this as well.
We've got that piece down.
So yeah, there you go. That was brilliant, wasn't it? But getting light in it, I think those are the four elements. You've got to take a step back and say, if my HRV is still chronic, do I have a disease process going on? And that's when you go to your doctor and say, okay, here's what's happening. I've got this chronic low. I'm exercising. I'm getting a lot of great nutrients in. My sleep is fixed. I'm sleeping well. This was the first sign we saw that HRV, when we first really started to develop this product, we distributed a sample run. Everyone came back and said, I am sleeping. Everyone says I'm sleeping like a baby. And if you've ever had a baby, babies don't sleep. I'm sleeping like a grandparent. Okay. I'm out all night. And that is the core of recovery. You cannot fix HRV without good cardiovascular exercise and without good sleep. Those two things are critical.
Yeah, and presumably you take them together, those two supplements, because you're taking the spermidine alongside to help the autophagy, and then you're doing the HRV to help that inflammation.
I think there's a lot of science to back up that decision. And listen, I do a stack of other supplements as well. I'm a nicotinamide riboside guy, so I use NR. I think that's important. I think you have to listen, unless you're living on a beach, you're probably not getting enough sunlight to generate enough vitamin D. So I supplement vitamin D, and I've got a series of other things I use, and those are key elements. Those are key molecules. But yeah, I think when you're taking a look at that, listen, the data is really clear. The thing that will take you out late in life is inflammatory related diseases. Inflammatory related diseases are associated with autophagy. Autophagy is an important process. There's a reason why fasting is a part of every major religion. Okay. It is a health driven process. We've known about this. Now we know there's this molecule. There's this thing called spermidine that used to be in food. With our industrial production of food, we tend to blanch it out a little bit. We are harvesting ours from Central European wheat. We can't harvest it from American wheat because of our industrial farming complex, our industrial farming practices. But we know about it now, and again, if you're a natto eater, if you fermented soy, things like that, I can't choke that stuff down. But there's this nice little supplement that there's a huge number of health benefits that come with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it's interesting. We kind of gone from talking about exercise and now about recovery and how you can support the body through in that inflammatory process. So tell us where we can find all your stuff, Don, because we want to make sure that we direct people to the right source.
So if you want to learn more about Mode and Method HRV Plus, it's from a brand that we call Mode and Method. modemethod.com, www.modemethod.com. That's the site for HRV Plus. If you want to learn about spermidine, You can go to Spermidine.us, SPERMIDINELIFE, Spermidinelife.us. That's where you'll find that. And if you have questions, listen, I'm on social, Don Moxley. Most of my socials, just a straight Don Moxley, whether it's Instagram or Twitter. I'm trying to do a better job with Instagram. I'm not very good at it yet. Most of the research stuff that I go through, I push through Twitter or LinkedIn. You can hit me on both those platforms if you have questions. And I'm pretty available. So, and I respond to most legitimate requests.
Thank you. And of course, you'll be on our Rebel Scientist shop, so people can find you there as well. But thank you so much for taking the time, Don. I mean, some of these things, I've been told many, many times, but sometimes you just have to keep listening to get the message, because I honestly don't think I'd got the message about that heart rate variability dropping was a good sign if you're exercising, but then you need to bring it back up with the recovery.
There you go. It's the cycle.
It's the cycle, because I'm kind of looking at I'm doing this running, and I'm, like I say, weights tomorrow and everything, and I'm looking at it and it's kind of going down and down. But you're right. That is the next piece, is to then, okay, let's cycle it round and bring it back up. And
think about your modalities. Again, running is not a gentle modality. I mean, you pay it. There's a price that you pay. Maybe cycle some things in there. Again, parking your butt on a bike for a period of time with a heart rate monitor. Give yourself compassion. It's okay to train in zone 2. You don't shame yourself for that. That's a good place to be. Russ, don't shame yourself.
Hey, how did you know, Don? Don, I'm shaming myself right now.
I get it.
This very moment. Don, it's great to meet you. Please, we'd love to have you back on. We also wish you well as you're rolling around America. It's something my wife and I have talked about too, and I've got 10 more years of work. I have 3 in college right now, so I'm not able to move because I've got to get ready. I got to pay a couple more things of tuition here. But once they're done, then we'll sell the house and get.
Looking forward to third, aren't you?
Yeah,
I am.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing that you mentioned, and for me, I'm become obsessed really because of Sarah around brain health. And I have a creative brain, and I'm writing. And what I've noticed is I'm getting older. I forget a lot. Like I don't remember as much as I used to. So I think all of this is there to say, like, let's keep the body aging slowly. We went through epigenetic testing. Let's slow down the aging process. This is a great episode for you to understand what you should be doing to keep active and how to measure activity in the right way now. So
yeah, listen, the opposite of aging is not a good thing. Okay. If you're not aging, you're dead. So, and aging well, again, I have a good friend, Ken Ford, who says he wants to, his longevity is he wants to be happy dead. And our challenge,
called ecstasy. That's called bad Coachella ecstasy is what that is. Sorry.
I'm not touching that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
So
it's a good way to end, though, right? It's a good way to end. Yeah.
It's the way, and I just wanted the days, again, physical capacity to enjoy the life I'm given. Am I able to go out and hike and climb and do and explore and enjoy that? Am I able to, if a friend calls, can I help them move their piano? Because they don't call about math problems. And again, be that crazy 9-year-old. That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah, well, thank you, Don, for coming on and tell us about it. But actually, thank you for kind of exhibiting it so that we can also, have something to aim for, because I think you're doing it.
I appreciate that, you guys.
That's totally cool. See you soon, Don.
See ya.
Thank you. Take care.
Breaking the gray.